So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacturer hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.
Welcome to this week's Energy Show. Now, there was a great article recently in Wired magazine called The Spectacular Burnout of a Solar Panel Salesman. And the subtitle was, he thought he'd make millions of dollars selling solar panels door to door. The reality was much darker. So today's Energy Show is going to be about the things that you don't want to hear from solar salespeople and some of the misconceptions that are out there about the industry. We're going to have a roundtable discussion today with some of our sales team, and the goal is to give homeowners perspectives on good and bad solar sales approaches, and also insights from solar salespeople about tricky questions that customers ask that aren't really easy to answer. This isn't a frequently asked questions presentation. You can kind of look those up. This is more inside information, and I think you're going to be pretty pleased with listening to the responses. So basically, there's two ways to sell solar. You can take your company, solar company can take a respectful, consultative, customer service-oriented approach, ethical, and try and be honest. And in my view, that's the best way to ensure long-term success of the solar business. And the other option, it's pretty common, unfortunately, is really high pressure, aggressive, maximizing the salesperson's commission, and it sometimes can border on the very lack of ethics. This approach works really well to maximize short-term sales revenue, and it's not very good at all for the long-term success of the solar company. So we're going to do a little bit of role-playing, and joined by a few of our experienced salespeople, whom we refer to as design consultants. Mark Chandik's been with for a number of years. He's our director of sales, and Jessica Stevenson is one of our star design consultants. So I'm just going to start off with some questions, and this isn't really scripted, so we're just going to see what Jessica and Mark think about these. All right, we're going to start with things solar salespeople hate to hear from customers. First question. If I add up all the costs of the equipment I can buy online, it totals less than half of what you want to charge me. To a solar salesperson, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, well, thanks for having us, Barry. This is Mark. Long-time listener, first-time guest. So thanks for having me and Jessica. Happy to dive into these. That's a great question. It's one we get, quite a bit, and it can be a difficult one to kind of take head on. But really, the best way to address it is simply that, like any consumer product, any home renovation, you can always get materials for less. Like I could go to Home Depot tomorrow and buy a hot water heater for myself right off the shelf. But who's going to install it? Who's going to get it permitted? Who's going to do all the electrical wiring, right? There's a lot more that goes into a solar and storage or HVAC installation than just simply buying materials. And a lot of consumers aren't always thinking about that. So, it's our responsibility as the consultant to, address the concern, explain it in an easy way, and just be honest that, you're looking for us to do a whole service. You're not looking for us to be a middleman who just, here's a transaction of products, right?
Exactly. Jessica here. Thank you, Barry, for having me on the show today. And just following up on what Mark stated, I think that sometimes when customers are looking at components or materials online, they're looking at the battery, they're looking at the solar modules, but they're not looking down to the nuts and bolts. They're not looking at the flashings. So there's a lot more components that customers don't always recognize that go into the installation that we need to utilize for safety and code measures.
Next question from a customer. Can I get the new high-efficiency XYZ special battery that I read about online?
It's a great question. There's so many batteries out on the market, and you talk about this a lot on your show, Barry, that, we get frequent, cold calls, cold emails from people offering XYZ battery, and we're very selective here at Cinnamon Energy to just make sure that we're always choosing products that are, first and foremost, reliable, tested, sound warranties, known companies, right? Every other day you're going to hear about a new battery product coming out. And, can you get the new high efficiency XYZ battery that you read about online, like that new solid state battery that I heard is an awesome breakthrough? The reality is a lot of these technologies are not ready for mass market adoption. The best batteries are ones that are tested, come with strong warranties, efficiency is an important aspect, of course, of any product, but it's not the whole picture. For me, the most important thing that you want to be looking at when you're looking at a battery is that reliability. We've been there, right? The worst thing you can see as an installer you get from a customer is, they buy this equipment, they're expecting it to work, and it doesn't follow through. The worst situation a homeowner can find themselves in after they purchase the batteries, it doesn't meet those expectations. And so reliability is more what you want to focus on, not necessarily efficiency.
Okay, good. All right, next question from a customer. I don't want a building permit because I'm building an experimental fusion generator in the garage and I don't want the city to find out. What do we do?
Well, for that, generally, as a rule of thumb here at Cinnamon, at least, we always request and require to go through the permitting process. And there is a big reason for that. When you're looking at integrating a solar and battery system to your home, what most of my clients, at least, the goal is for savings. They want to not only get energy independent as much as possible, but they want to get away from their PG&E bill, as well as maybe get some payback from PG&E for the power they're sending back to the grid. Essentially, when you install a solar and battery system, you've basically created a micro power plant at your own residence. But for you to get that payback, we have to go through proper interconnection with PG&E. Otherwise, you lose out on a lot of the benefit for that system.
All right, so in this example, if the experimental fusion generator in the garage is not working, you're really going to need to get a signed off permit on your solar and battery system. So the permits are important.
Yes. Absolutely. And to kind of piggyback off that, permits are an absolutely crucial aspect of this industry. I mean, we frequently work on projects where people have unpermitted work on the property, and it's such a nightmare. I mean, what's even worse is that people could have moved into the house with an unpermitted work, and they didn't even know, and they have to find out the hard way. So we always get permits. We're very diligent about that. And as Jessica said, if you want to see any financial return on this investment, you have to get interconnected, and you can't get interconnected without a building permit.
All right, good. Another question from a customer. Why does it take 2 months to complete the installation? Another company guaranteed the installation in 1 week.
Yeah, another common question when we get down to it is lead times. It's probably one of the more commonly asked questions you hear in any kind of presentation. And yeah, 2 or 3 months is about what we experience here. And a big part of that is just because we're very diligent, right? We take the time to make sure it is designed correctly, the engineering is done properly. It's a lot of work and planning that goes into these projects. It's not as simple as just here's the panels, slap them on your roof, and you're done. There's a lot more that goes into it, especially if you're looking at a battery. So, and also it's kind of a healthy sign of a solar company that they have a backlog of projects. Whenever we get down to the end of the year and people are like really wanting to get installed because they want the tax credit, I'm quite honest with people when I tell them, like, look, if you're talking to a company, it's the end of November and they say they can install you next month, that's not a good sign. That means they don't have a lot of backlog projects, which means they don't have a lot of customers. A good, reputable company is going to have at least a 2-month backlog. That's just the industry standard, I would say.
All right, next question. My cousin Vinny is an electrician, and he'll help me do the installation. Can I just buy the parts from you?
I get this a lot. Also, I have a lot of customers who will ask what happens if I do my own installation, whether they're bringing in their cousin Vinny or just trying to do it themselves. And one of the things that you really miss out on when you do your own installation is, one, there are a lot of safety concerns when you're working with electrical first off. So I think it's really, really important to work with associates in a company that has electricians that are extremely familiar or experienced with these systems. But also there's warranties that come along with the installation of these systems. And those warranties are generally put forth or applicable depending on what company does the installation and the quality of that installation. So if you happen to have your cousin Vinny do the installation or you do it yourself, and let's say 6 months down the line that system fails or you have arcing because something is installed incorrectly, well, now you potentially don't have any kind of coverage to get that system either replaced or serviced because of the route or the method of installation that you went with.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. Whenever we get these questions, and we've done it over the past 25 years, I've provided modules and racking and things like that to friends once or twice. And inevitably, there's a zillion other little pieces that you need to have, like grounding clips and special wire that you can only buy in a certain place and connectors that need to be done. And then you have to go through manufacturer certification to figure out how to configure these things. Imagine if your business was configuring laptop computers for an office. Well, configuring the battery is just as complicated, but you need training. So there's all these things that's missed. And then, sounds really silly, but at the end of the day, there's a pile of paperwork that you need to file. Sometimes you can't even fill those out as an individual. And so the first few times any solar company does that, first half dozen times, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. And that stretches things out. So an individual or my cousin Vinny is going to really have a hard time doing it right the first time. Okay, all right, next customer question. Can you fix my roof and roll the price of the roof upgrade into the solar project so I can get a bigger tax credit?
Good one that I like to always answer a little bit of a joke, which is how aggressive is your accountant? But no, the reality is, with the introduction of the Inflation Reduction Act, they made it very clear in the tax laws that, any kind of roof work is not eligible for the 30% investment tax credit anymore. It kind of used to be a bit of a gray area, and you've probably heard of, hey, my friend did this, and they got a new roof, and they got solar, and well, unfortunately, just like your friend who put his battery in his garage 5 years ago, there's new rules. It's a constantly changing industry, and if you're working with a good company that keeps up with things, they'll be able to give you the honest truth, which is that, you really cannot do that. So unfortunately, the answer is no, but there are other things you could do electrically that, can be rolled in to help with some of those costs if you're thinking about like a main panel upgrade. But yeah, putting your roof in solar and getting that 30% back, just not a reality to these days.
It's not kosher.
No, it's not.
And by the way, what's interesting recently, over the past year or so, we've seen a number of our solar customers get an audit from the IRS. They're not auditing the whole tax return. They're just ordering to verify that they took the right amount of solar tax credit. So they're asking, did these solar panels qualify for the tax credit? Does racking qualify? Does the inverter qualify? And if you've played some games with things, it becomes pretty apparent to the IRS that you might not have done something wrong, and then you can be in trouble. Fortunately, all of our customers, we go by the book. We have the receipts. We have the invoices, documentation from manufacturers, and that's not a problem. But I would worry about companies that are letting you know or telling you that you can expand the scope of that tax credit. So it's a dangerous approach to take.
Usually I'll let my clients know too that I'm not a tax advisor. So the best method when you have these questions is go to your CPA, go to your tax accountant. They are the ones that are going to be able to best answer what you can or cannot get back based on the IRA or what you are applicable for.
Yeah, something we've taught all the salespeople here is we are not tax professionals. Talk to your CPA. It's very important. We don't want to mislead you. And legally, we can't even give tax advice.
Exactly.
And realistically, these rules change. So your CPA may need to be educated on the latest forms, but they'll be hopefully conservative and watching out for your best interest.
Which he can stay updated by subscribing to The Energy Show by Barry Cinnamon.
Yeah, we're working on the next. What are the solar tax credit forms for the 2024 installations that tax credits are accessible in April of 2025? Okay. All right, now we're going to talk about something that I call the solar bro life. And solar bros is a term that's given to solar panel salespeople who are just very excited but very aggressive and typically door knockers. And that's the article that was written in Wired Magazine that sort of goes into. But it's kind of interesting, and it has an impact on people's perceptions of solar salespeople and the industry as a whole. And unfortunately, some of these perceptions are negative, that the industry is trying to overcome these aggressive, unethical salespeople. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about some examples of solar bros and what they do. Just kind of looking at this article in Wired, you can kind of take a look at it. One of the comments was, some of my solar bro friends say they make over $250,000 knocking on doors and selling solar. A comment was, that's FU money, and I want it too. And if I sell right, I can make commissions per job of $5,000 to $10,000 on a single sale. And, these solar bros, that they're not just door knockers, they're kind of like it's almost a lifestyle. They work out at the gym in the morning, and they descend on a new neighborhood every day, different neighborhood, like locusts. And some of them say that they're so pumped up about helping people and making money that they kind of put aside some of the ethics. So I don't know. You guys have any comments on solar bros and what you see out there?
Yeah, I certainly can comment on the solar bro life. I get a chuckle out of the name solar bro because I've been in this industry like 8 years now, and I feel like just in the last year or two, solar bros really become like a mainstream term now because it's become so prevalent, as you said. My experience, having been, kind of recruited by a solar bro organization is very much heavily weighted on you're going to get rich. Very much they're just incentivizing you to take this because there's a big payout at the end. But the reality of a lot of these companies is that the ones that are getting rich aren't the ones that are actually selling a lot. A lot of these companies, they incentivize people to bring in and recruit more individuals, so to where the person who brought you in is now getting a kickback based on the sales of that individual. It's almost like a multi-level marketing tactic. And, it's effective, I will say. I've seen organizations, and I still see it online, like they'll post their paychecks on their Instagram or Facebook story, and I got a great opportunity, DM me, I'd love to talk to you, no experience needed. And they're honestly, it's kind of predatory in my opinion. They're taking advantage of naive individuals who probably don't have a lot of experiences or really anything like going for them. And they see this like huge opportunity to quote unquote get rich, and they fall into the unfortunate reality of what the solar bro life is. And you're right, it is very aggressive. It's a lot of door knocking, long hours. It's not very glamorous. I've knocked on doors before in my career, and I will say, it's not fun in the middle of the summer heat, spending 10, 12 hours a day, getting doors slammed on your face every single minute. So it's, unfortunately, again, it's become prevalent because it's easy and cheap to bring these people on. They're commissioned only. Just round them up in a big van, drop them off, have someone keep an eye on them, and you just kind of hope that they're bringing in new leads for your company. And a lot of these times, these solar bros don't even sell. They're just literally there to lead gen. They're just there to knock on the door and hand it off to someone who can close. They call it the closer, the setter closer. It's become very popular. So I feel bad for those that fall into it because I don't think they know what they got themselves into a lot of times, and they're kind of like knee deep, so they just keep going with it. But it's definitely become very prevalent. And, I'd say if you're a solar shopper, you want to be able to look for those things to where you're talking to someone who is in this quote-unquote solar bro lifestyle, which we'll get into.
There can be women who are also solar bros. So, Jessica, what's your impression of the solar bro concept?
Absolutely. Solar bro is not gender specific. It's generally a culture that is cultivated by the company that these representatives work for. And the first two things that come to my mind when I hear the term solar bro is inexperience and smoke screens. Because more often than not, when you have the associate that's door knocking, it's, as Mark stated, they're the ones that are usually kind of the setter, but they don't always have the technical knowledge. They don't have the industry knowledge to really consult you and put together a proper solution. As is Mark, I've been in this industry for about 7 to 8 years now, and a lot of my background was as a project manager. And there were many times I would get plan sets that would come across my desk, and it would be from a, quote unquote solar bro. And the majority of the data on that plan set or the just electrical integration would not work. It didn't make sense. It wasn't a code. And just the headaches and the nightmares that some of these customers who were so sure based on those smoke screens that they were sold on weren't going to work. It was just so disheartening. And to be on the other end of that, to have to clean that up, that's not something I would wish on any homeowner. One of the things that I like to tell my clients that this is not plug and play. I'm not selling you a blender. These systems are very complex. So you want to have somebody that has familiarity with not only the industry and the regulations, but how these systems can integrate and how they're going to work for you, because everybody uses energy differently. And if you have somebody that's trying to sell you something, but they don't have the experience or the education or the understanding to know that, and more importantly, they're not properly set up from their company to learn that, it can just create all kinds of complications. And what was it, 5 years ago? This is the whole reason that the California Public Utilities Commission put what we call the Consumer Protection Guide together, because there were so many solar bros and people selling systems that just didn't work, weren't to the benefit of the homeowner, or it was just very unethical, as has been stated.
I think smoke screen's the right word. It's a lot of misleading things, and the reality is most of these solar bros, they probably couldn't even explain how a solar panel works. Most of them are honestly trained just to sell financing. You're paying X in a utility bill. You're already paying this bill. Why not swap it for a lower fixed bill? You're already paying this. Why not just pay a cheaper cost? They don't really take the time, again, to walk you through each system component. How does everything work? What to expect in the long term? So, as a consumer, you really want to be asking good questions and really making sure that whoever you're talking to can answer them, and they're not just spending all the time focusing on savings. Because yes, savings are a huge part of this investment, but as Jessica very rightly said, these are complex systems. So yeah, it's like I said, it's growing in numbers, unfortunately, and I really do. I mean, as much as I hate that 24-page consumer protection guide that every customer has to read and sign before they move forward with us, because it's always, oh, your contract's very long. Well, it's because 2/3 of it is a state document. It does serve a good need to the industry because it's helping people hopefully not fall into these smoke screens, as Jessica said.
Yeah, and one of the smoke screens that I see is just very easy for the solar pro to paint that picture is basically not being accurate about the savings in the system. Yeah. So customers don't really know how many kilowatt hours, how much money 20 panels are going to save on the roof, but a solar pro can go and say that 20 panels is going to completely wipe out your electric bill. You're going to go from $400 to zero, and unlikely to happen. And you get up in a situation where suddenly you're paying more money. You're paying the financing, the lease, or the PPA for the solar system, plus paying a big electric bill, and very, very hard to get out of these contracts. So we just got to watch out up front. Fundamentally, in my view, using that kind of aggressive door knocking strategy for a solar installation company, a solar and battery installation company, is not a good way to ensure long-term success of your company. You get long-term success from happy referrals and customers, and you're not going to get any referrals if your customers aren't happy after the installation is complete.
Yep. Yeah, and that's why these companies, they pick a new hot territory. They drop a bunch of guys in for 3-6 months. They call it a blitz. They sell a bunch of jobs and just leave. And who's left to take care of the customer? Usually no one. So,
and I just want to say that if you are working for a company, let's say you're listening to this podcast and you work for a solar company who cultivates and promotes that type of approach, it is not too late. You do not have to stick with a company where you have to be a solar bro. There are amazing companies such as Cinnamon Energy Systems where, I'm very lucky that we cultivate and promote education and learning and, following institutions such as California Solar and Storage Association. So we keep up to date with the changes and the regulations and the things that are really important and that do affect the homeowner more so than many might think. So.
And I'll have to add one more thing. The majority of solar companies in the U.S., they're reputable. They care about the company. They care about the employees. They care about the customers. And all over the country, here in Silicon Valley, there's a few others that are really good. That goes throughout the whole country. So just do your homework if you're looking at solar and find the right kind of company that has good referrals that you can trust.
Absolutely.
Yep. Absolutely. Every territory has a good company there. You just got to find it. And to Jessica's point, if you're out there in the industry, you can have a great, very fulfilling career not being in the solar bro lifestyle. It is not the only way to be successful in solar sales.
Yeah, it just reminded me, a number of our very best solar salespeople here at this company were solar bros. I remember this was before you, Mark, but one of our designers came by one of our salespeople came by for an interview, and I'm asking him, what did you sell before? And he said, well, he just finished selling 10 panels to a retired couple for $20,000. This was in 2013. I'm like, you must be mistaken. It must be 20 solar panels, or it was 10,000. He said, no, he sold it at over $2,000 a solar panel, which is 2.5 times the market rate. And that's what he was coached to do. And he couldn't sleep at night. He knew that this wasn't a good deal, but that's what they were asking to do. So some of our best salespeople, design consultants, came from that culture, and they want to sleep well at night, and they want to have happy customers and referrals. And the Solar Pro technique is not conducive to that. Okay. All right. Well, now let's dive into some of the things solar customers, hate to hear from solar and battery salespeople. Number one, and this is something that I hate that doorbell rings and it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon or 6 o'clock on a weekend. And it's some guy knocks on the door. He's got a hat and a clipboard, and sometimes he's got a badge that I can't read. And he says, "Hi, I'm from your local utility. We have a special deal for you on free solar panels if you sign up today." Mark and Jessica, what's going on there?
So that is a very classic smokescreen. A lot of these solar bros, door-to-door knockers, the first thing they're taught is how to break through the barrier of the customer at the door, right? They've got shields up. They don't want to talk to anybody, so they're kind of, how can you approach them in a very easy manner to where they are going to listen? So unfortunately, a lot of times they're taught to mislead the client and almost pose as a utility employee. Then they don't get the impression you're trying to sell them anything, right? You're there to help them. That's the whole goal. Help them save money, help them go solar. So, pretend that you work for the solar company and you're here to, the classic line is, I'm just here to check your utility meter. You know how they put solar panels up around your neighbors? You've seen, Bob down the street put up solar panels. Yeah, that's all part of a new program where we can get solar panels on your roof for no cost. And then they go into the, various sorts of pitches, right? So it's a huge red flag if someone is posing as a utility employee. They're probably wearing a vest. Like you said, they got some badge. They quickly show it to you. But if you actually look at the badge, it doesn't say anything. So, yeah, it's unfortunate, and this is kind of, we have to outsell these bad actors a lot here, and kind of educate clients on what the realities are and really, tell them the truth. But yeah, that's become a very common tactic to just ease the tension, to get the homeowner to listen to you when you're at the door.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the technique of saying that I'm with the utility is technically illegal in California. You're not allowed to do that,
Yep.
but they still do it. It's also illegal in California to say, I'm going to give you free solar panels. You don't have to pay any money.
Yep.
That's illegal. And now there may be deals where you lease it and you don't have to make any immediate payments, but you will have to pay them over time, and you're still going to have to pay whatever remains of your electric bills. This is probably one of the most devious techniques used by solar door knockers.
Well, and what's sad too is if you don't read the paperwork, just more specifically in relation to leased systems, more often than not, you end up paying almost twice the cost for the system and for those components over time. Because if you read the fine print, you'll note that after a few years, the lease cost goes up at an incremental rate. Sometimes it's 3%, sometimes it's 5%. So it just gets more and more expensive. Not always the greatest deal. And as you stated, it's illegal for anybody to impersonate someone from the local utilities. That for me, in my role, I try to be as honest and transparent. And if you're starting a conversation with smoke screens or just misleading, like Mark said, that's a huge red flag. And there is no such thing as free solar. Whether you lease, whether, there's PPAs out there. And one of the things that I think a lot of clients don't always recognize too is that if you have a company come in and they own the system on your home, if you have any changes to that residence, whether it be the electrical, whether you're trying to refinance, well, now that company has a say in relation to your property and how that moves forward.
All right, good. All right, next high pressure technique. You may hear your solar salesperson knock on your door and come in, and you talk for a while and you kind of get interested, but you want to review it. And then you're going to get a lot of pressure because the solar salesperson is going to say, how do I get you to sign this today?
Yeah. So we take a different approach here, but I will say right now, solar, it's not free. There are costs involved. And, if you're getting a battery, you're not looking at small cost a lot of times either. It's not a decision you want to make at your doorstep with a stranger. A lot of these solar, bros, they are taught very high pressure tactics to get the client to sign on the spot, and a lot of times they incentivize them to, like a extra commission if they can get that, what they call a one-touch close, like get them to sign right there and then. But the reality is, as we've talked about a little bit here, is that these are complex systems. It takes a while. You want to ask the right questions as a consultant to make sure that you're designing a system that meets the needs of your client. These are not black and white, cookie cutter solutions. They're very customized to every home. You can have two same square footage homes next to each other, but the energy consumption habits can be wildly different. And how you design a system for that, it's going to be very, like I said, different across the board. So it's not a decision you should just make after a 4-hour conversation with a door knocker. Take time to think about it, ask good questions. And if you're getting a quote online, which we see a lot of now in today's days, like people get like the instant quotes, no one's even been to your house yet. How can they honestly give you a true, honest, fair quote when all they're relying on is Google Map imagery? It's just not reality. And a lot of times, unfortunately, people sign up for these, and these are very complicated contracts, and they're locked in. And all of a sudden, they're getting bombarded with change orders, extra costs that they had no clue about. So, yeah, there's a lot of high pressure tactics. And I'd say, if someone's trying to get you to rush to sign, that's a huge red flag. You don't want to do that. Make sure you're getting an honest, real evaluation, and you're taking time to really make an informed decision, because it is a big decision. It's not small money you're spending, and you want to make sure you understand what you're purchasing.
And I want to highlight too that it's, the sign today will take $1,000 off your cost, because it's not wrong if a company wants to give you a discount after they've had multiple conversations with you, you've built a relationship with them, they want to earn your business. That's not the, I think, unethical aspect that we're speaking on. It's the high pressure, well, I'm here now, you should sign today, and we're going to give you the money off right this moment. Because as Mark stated, these are complex systems. There's a lot that goes into it. Everybody's footprint at home, whether you're talking energy usage and or just where your electrical runs are, where is your main service panel, where can we put components, how much wiring do we have to use? We can find a solar solution for pretty much anybody, but it is never going to be a one size fits all. And every homeowner has different goals and objectives, especially here in the state of California, where we are moving forward towards decarbonization, getting away from gas. And so having a company that also wants to understand, are you getting an EV in the future? Are you getting a heat pump system in the future? Whether that be water heater, whether that be HVAC. Are you getting a electrified pool pump or removing your thermal off your roof, right? These are questions, and this is analysis that's going to take a few days, maybe a few weeks to really properly analyze and configure. And what a lot of folks don't always recognize too is that when you sign these contracts, I've worked for companies where in the contract it states, if you cancel after contract signature, we have the right to charge you 20% or a certain percentage of this contract. And an ethical company will not hold to that, but there are some companies when they're, just their goal is that bottom dollar and not the relationship with the customer, they will apply that to you. So,
caveat emptor. Another thing that customers hate to hear from solar salespeople, here's a quote: you need to upgrade your electrical service to meet local building codes. What is that all about?
Respectfully, we hate it too. Electrical service panels are, they come in all sorts of shapes, sizes, right? But it is a very critical aspect of any solar project. And as a homeowner, you hate hearing it because, unfortunately, that means your system just became a lot more expensive and the lead time just got twice as long. No, we don't like having that conversation. That's probably our least favorite topic. I'm sure Jessica would agree, because you can be having a great rapport with a client and then boom, you look at the electrical panel, it's 100 amps, but you want to put a 10 kilowatt system. And it's like, oh, shoot. You hope they have overhead utility lines. That makes it a little easier. But no, but it is something, it's a reality, you need to be thinking about what's code compliant. There's the National Electric Code, and there are rules that state how large a solar breaker you can put on a main electrical panel depending on the amperage. So, any good, honest solar provider will be able to look at your panel and give you the truth, which is this code compliant, or do we need to make some changes? And the good news is there are new devices and new technologies out these days that can make it a little easier to avoid a main panel upgrade, but it's very subjective to that client. We've talked about this a number of times, Barry, where it's like, it really is probably better for the client just to upgrade their service. Putting on a power control system or a smart panel, it's not always the best solution for everybody. Sometimes they really would benefit from those 200 amps. So, it's like I said, not something we like to hear either. So,
it's interesting, as Mark said, it's generally not because the solar salesperson wants to make more money. They would rather sell a less expensive system without that upgrade, but it's something that you're much better off to hear that early on in the process. Exactly. There's other companies, if they're selling remotely, they're going to take your money and you're going to be obligated, and a month will go by, and then you're going to get an email from the solar engineering company that does it and says, oh, gee, we have to add $8,000 onto your contract because we can't fit that system without upgrading the panel. And then you're really stuck. So finding the right company is important.
And that's if you have overhead lines from a utility, because if you have underground lines coming in, you might be looking at $10,000 just for the upgrade, another $15,000 to $20,000 just from PG&E for the engineering costs. So
and the trenching, yeah,
and the trenching,
and that doesn't include the hazard pay and the aggravation dealing with the utility.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right. Another comment that customers hate to hear from solar salespeople. There's at least a 4-month delay on getting that particular battery system that you have your heart set on.
So nobody likes to hear that their system is going to take longer than, the already proposed 2 to 3 months just based on a material, distribution or availability supply issue. Sadly, it's one of those things that we don't always have control of. But I would also say that, if you're out there and you're looking to purchase a energy storage system for your home, whether that be for comfort and safety because you've got medical baseline and you need to have your electricity run during an outage, or whether it be for savings, don't get too tied to one specific system. A good company is going to have a few different options in relation to energy storage systems that are reliable and useful to meet your needs. And, for me right now, as Mark has stated prior, we've had this happen. There have been supply issues, and not just this year and not just this time. We saw major supply issues during COVID. And everybody saw delays on everything during COVID. But if one system is not available and you are concerned about the timeline, whether that be for tax purposes, no matter what that might be, there is probably another system there that can still fit your needs, that is reliable, that a good consultant can help redesign or design for you. So just don't get too stuck on a brand name, because again, there are multiple energy storage systems out there that can accomplish the goal that you're looking for.
There's usually a few, like good installers only like to install maybe 2 or 3 things because it just gets too complicated to do too many. But, as a homeowner, I'd rather hear it up front during the sales process that there's a backlog than sign up and find out 3 months later that you talk to the company and they're like, well, there's a 6-month backlog now. And unfortunately, a lot of times these backlogs, they don't get shorter. They're still in the process of getting longer. So work with a reputable company. They'll give you the straight scoop, and then you make the right decision there. Okay, another thing that customers hate to hear, because they may be skeptical about it, is when a solar salesperson says, my company only has 5-star perfect reviews.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those pressure tactics you'll hear. I've even heard of companies like they train the salespeople that are going door to door to show them our reviews online when you're at their doorstep. Reality is no company's perfect, right? I mean, Cinnamon Energy's been in business for 10, 13 years now, and we've made mistakes. Any honest company is going to be upfront and say, hey, we're not a perfect company. We make mistakes. They're not common, but we do make them. And I think if you go online and see that a company, for one, is only 2 or 3 years old, but they have 200 5-star reviews, which is a common thing, very unlikely those are real reviews. Buying reviews is a real thing, unfortunately. And, any honest company that is actually doing genuine work, they're going to have a mix of reviews. They're going to have ideally mostly 5 stars, but there's going to be the 4s and the 3s and the dreaded, hopefully very few 1s in there. But it's not really about being perfect. It's how do you respond to problems? That's the important thing. I always look at any problem as an opportunity to show them, that we can follow through on our word. Because I say to my pitch, we're not a perfect company. We make mistakes, but the difference between us and the other companies that we're here when those mistakes happen, and we don't just leave you high and dry.
Yep. And there's a lot of good companies in every part of the country. I know particularly in California that they've been in business for 10, 15, 20 years, sometimes longer. And they have the vast majority are good reviews because they get a lot of referrals, but there's always a few that didn't work out exactly right. And, that's just reality. All right. Another thing that customers hate to hear is you have way too much shade on your roof, so the system output would be low. What do you say to that?
Sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles. And, as a consultant, I want to design a system for a homeowner that is going to have ample generation, really get that customer as close to energy independence as possible. But, especially here in the Bay Area, there's a lot of neighborhoods where there's a lot of very large oak trees or cypress trees that can impede on the system generation. Now, I don't know that my response is ever generally there is too much shade on your roof. I like to start the conversation in more of a, what could we possibly do to open up some of these areas or get you some more direct solar irradiance at your property? Sometimes that means if you have enough property, doing a ground mount system, not doing a rooftop solar system. Sometimes that means having the conversation about maybe getting an arborist out. Is there any of those trees that you can trim back if this is important to you? Sometimes customers are even willing to remove trees completely because there's that one tree on the south side of their property that, if they just remove that one tree, the system will increase its production by, 50 to 60%, whatever it might be based on the size of whatever that shade factor is. Or
that one seriously diseased tree that's a menace to the neighborhood has to go.
Yeah.
And if you have an arborist in town, it may not be something that you can solve easily yourself with a chainsaw. But there's ways around it. And the most important thing to me is just making sure that if there's shade and output's low, then the customer knows what the real output's going to be.
And I'm really lucky. I got to design a system for my father who lives in the Redwood City area, and he lives in an area where, again, he has lots of oaks. He is absolutely a big fan of the trees in his backyard, so there was no question as to whether or not he was going to cut down those trees. It wasn't happening. And he has a system that produces about 70% in relation to what his consumption is. But the fact of the matter is that he still has a lesser bill month to month. And when we had that atmospheric storm that shut down power for 3 days, both in, I think it was Atherton, Menlo Park, and Redwood City, he was at home watching a recorded soccer game. And my mother was out of the grocery store. She gets home and she said, "Did you know that the whole town is out of power?" And he had no idea. Even just with that smaller generation, system with batteries, it was able to sustain him through that outage. So.
And he didn't miss any of the soccer games.
And he didn't miss any of the recorded soccer game. No.
Love those stories.
All right. Another thing that customers hate to hear from solar salespeople. Local building codes will not allow us to install your batteries in your garage or in your basement.
Yeah, this one comes up a lot, and it's another one of those where we hate having to tell you as well, because one of the hardest parts of Jessica's job is finding a code-compliant exterior wall to fit more than one battery. And that garage, man, that'd be a great place to put those batteries half the time. But the reality is, at least here in California, there are fire codes that are in place that where if you want to put a battery inside, there's just a lot of extra components you need to add, such as heat detectors, fire alarms, bollards, and it just gets so expensive. We typically just want to avoid it altogether. That's not to say we won't entertain it if the client wants to spend the extra $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to make their garage code compliant, but again, if they have an exterior wall that works well, it's just going to be better. And it's also better from a service standpoint. If it's on an exterior wall, we can come out and repair it or do maintenance on it without you needing to be home. If it's in your garage, the coordination can just be more difficult. But yeah, it's one of those things people hate to hear. But again, like we've kind of becoming a theme here, it's good to talk about that early. It's not something you want to find out later after you've been promised by a solar bro, like, oh yeah, it'll be great there. It'll look perfect. We can hide it. No one will notice it. And then you get the call a month later. Hey, yeah, that's whatever he told you is not actually true.
And I think it's important for clients and customers and homeowners that are doing research and looking into get battery systems or solar systems too. One of the questions that I get once I've informed a client that they can't do an interior installation or that the batteries have to be separated by more than 3 feet from each other if you're doing multiple batteries is, well, my friend Joe down the street, well, he has 3 power walls in his garage. Well, if those power walls were installed, 4 or 5 years ago, the thing that we also come across often is code changes often, whether we're talking California Fire Code, whether you're talking local jurisdictional code in just your specific area or city. Just because your neighbor was able to do it a few years ago, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily applicable now. But that's where it's important for us, especially, or for any consultant that you're working with, to continue to keep up on what are the changes in the state, what are the changes with the local jurisdictions, so we can properly answer that question. As much as it's not always what we want to have to, the answer is not always what we want to have to give you, but it is what it is.
All right. Well, here's another thing that customers hate to hear from solar salespeople. This is from the solar salesperson himself, probably a solar bro. Even though our headquarters is out of state and I'm living in a local motel and eating frozen burritos while canvassing your neighborhood in a generic white van, our solar company will provide you with the very best local service on your system. What do you think about that?
I think that if you're probably, when you do ever need service, if you do need service, you're probably going to be waiting for quite a few weeks for that person to come back out, because they're not already going to, it's not like the motel that they were staying at has them, it's not reserved for them solely throughout the year for them to just jump back in so they could do service. And one of the things that I've experienced in project management is usually when you have a out-of-state contractor that's coming in because they're working as a subcontractor for, a what we call a coordination company that is local in the area. When you do call for service, there's generally a bit of finger pointing that goes on between the coordinator, whatever company you contracted with that auctioned your contract off to a subcontractor, and then the subcontractor themselves. So it's not, hey, you're right, we'll come out and this is our timeline, we'll be out there in a few days to do diagnostics, or we're looking into it right now. It's, hey, we'll call you back because we need to figure out who we're actually going to hold responsible to do this service work.
Yeah, services, it's an important part of the shopping experience, and it should be something that is always brought up in discussion. And the reality is, and I tell this to clients directly, is like the number one overlooked thing solar shoppers overlook is the long-term service and maintenance on their system. It's something most solar people don't want to talk about. They don't want to think about. They'll say, oh, you'll never need maintenance. You'll never need service. It's going to work perfectly for 25 years. When's the last time you bought a utility that didn't need service over 25 years? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you'll never need a maintenance call. I want to be able to sleep at night, right? And so to Jessica's point, it's a lot of what unfortunately happens in these scenarios specifically, where you've got the canvasser that's working for a company and they're selling the contract to a subcontract, it becomes a finger pointing game, and no one wants to take responsibility for the client. And who ends up getting screwed the most in that scenario is the client. Again, this is an investment, and the longer your system is down, the more your investment gets hurt. So working with a local provider, one that can answer the phone, be out there, hopefully in a matter of days, not weeks, that's the best scenario.
Yep. You're not just purchasing the components that are going to be on your home. You're purchasing a relationship. You're investing in a relationship with the company and provider that is doing the work for you.
All right. Well, these are really great set of answers to the questions, and I'm really glad to have Mark and Jessica here giving all of our listeners in the field perspective on how to choose the right solar system and how to choose the right solar installer and how to avoid the mistakes that other people make. All right. So thank you for tuning in. And if you missed any of today's show, you can always go to the Energy Show website at energyshow.biz and listen to the podcasts.